In Daniel chapter 6, we have a very familiar story. Everybody's heard it. You know it. Probably learned it in Sunday school, but it's the story of Daniel in the lion's den. And recently I was reading through this chapter, reading through this story, and as I was reading through it, there were some really interesting things that I've never really seen before, things that I believe are really powerful empowerment truths, empowerment points, if you will. And I'd like to share some of those with you in this segment. You know, a lot of times, I don't know, maybe you're like me. Sometimes it seems like heaven is silent. It seems like, God, where are you at? Are you listening? Are you hearing me? Do you know what I'm dealing with? And of course, we know that God knows, yes. But a lot of times we need to remind ourselves that when it seems like heaven is silent, God is still working. God is still there. He's not turned a deaf ear. He's still on the throne, and God is still working. And listen, the reality is there are and there will be days and seasons when life, it feels like you're in a lion's den. It feels like you're in this sealed up den where you're surrounded by adversaries and surrounded by temptations, and you're surrounded by obstacles and adversities from every side. You're surrounded by threats of all kinds. And it seems like it from time to time that those things happen. It seems like when you pray, it seems like your prayers, they just hit the ceiling and they bounce off, You feel like your strength has been utterly depleted. It's been drained and it's not there. And it seems like from time to time that the situation that you're in, it seems to have the final negative verdict on your life, that it's all over. That this is the end. It's not going to change. It's not going to get any better, and it's all over. And so what the enemy does, the enemy comes along and he whispers and says, you've been forgotten. God's forgot about you. And this is it. This is the end. And a lot of times we fail to look at examples in the Bible, and we fail to see ourselves sometimes in that example, in the imagery. A lot of times I think about Daniel. And a lot of times we fail to realize that what Daniel was in was literally a real lion's den. And you and I may never be in that situation. Dear God, I hope not. But we may find ourselves in things that appear like a lion's den, where we're surrounded by all sorts of adversity, all sorts of obstacles that we're seeing and that we're facing. And those things can reflect exactly what's going on in our life spiritually, And so here we are, and we see Daniel in this situation, and we see him surrounded by these threats and these adversities. But what you and I need to realize from time to time is that while we're going through these things here on this earth, as far as heaven is concerned, in heaven we're at rest. I mean, we're at rest in God's arms of safety, in his arms of security, regardless of what we're dealing with and regardless of what we're facing here on this earth. So as I was reading through this, there were some things that really stuck out to me, that came out to me that I'd never really seen before. And they're things that I call empowerment truths, things that can empower you, if you will. And so I want to share some of those with you. The first one that I came up with and that I saw here in this situation with Daniel, and that you and I need to realize in our own lives, is this. Not every battle that you fight, not every battle you go through is a punishment for sin. Think about that. Because a lot of times we make the mistake of thinking that, this battle that I'm facing means I've done something wrong. But that's not the case all the time. Not every battle that you fight, not every battle you go through is a punishment for sin. Some battles that you and I face, some battles that you and I go through are really platforms that God has set up because he wants to make a divine announcement to a world that is skeptical, to a world that is looking for something supernatural, a world that's looking to see, is there really a God? You know, God may set this thing up as a platform, and it's not a battle that you're fighting because you've sinned or you've missed God, but in actuality, it's a platform that God is going to use to make a divine, miraculous announcement to a world that is looking to see if in fact there is a God. They want to know, is this God real that you're serving? So what God will do from time to time, God will take this situation and He'll use it as a platform to use to announce His glory, to announce His victory to a skeptical world that's already skeptical. And you know, a lot of times we need to remind ourselves of something that I've had to remind myself of time and time again, and that is, not everything that you go through is about you. Not everything you battle is about you. And I know it's easy to think it is. It's easy to think, well, I'm dealing with this because of something I did. But in actuality, again, it may be that this is a moment. This is an opportunity that God wants to make a divine announcement. He wants to show a divine, miraculous sign that only He can to a world that's looking for an answer. Here's another empowerment truth that I saw in this story of Daniel, and that is that this lion's den that Daniel was in was not a mark of failure. You see, Daniel had done nothing wrong. Daniel did absolutely nothing wrong at all to be in this situation. And so from time to time, it's easy for us to think that when we find ourselves in the den of trouble, in the den of adversity, it's easy to think that we must have failed or we must have missed God. But Daniel's lion's den moment was not a mark of failure. It was simply the backdrop that God had chosen to expose and to show His superior power and glory to a wicked empire, to a wicked kingdom. Because, again, not everything that happens in your life is really about you. It could be that God is choosing to use this moment as a backdrop to expose and reveal His superior glory and power to a wicked and evil world. You know, think about it. The greatest test of your faith is going to be, what do you do when you don't have all the answers? I mean, I think about Joseph. Look at Joseph's life. There's Joseph, who even in the darkest moments of his life chose to stay true to God. He chose to stay obedient to God. And then Joseph made the profound statement when he said, what you meant for evil, what you meant to destroy me, God will take and turn it for my good. And so a lot of times we need to remind ourselves that this problem that I'm dealing with, this obstacle that I'm going through, this challenge, this adversity that I'm facing, it's not necessarily a mark of failure. It's not necessarily a sign that I've missed the God, but maybe, just maybe, it's the backdrop that God is choosing to reveal His power, to reveal His glory to a wicked and evil empire, or evil world, if you will. Here's a third thing that I saw in this lion's den experience with Daniel. Your unwavering consistency with God in secret will often provoke open opposition from the systems of this world. I want you to get that again. Your unwavering consistency with God in private. You know, a lot of times we fail to realize that a lot of times our private walk with God, we don't really a lot of times realize how powerful that can be. You know, it's easy to serve God in public. It's easy to stand up and represent God in public when all the eyes and attention are upon us, but it's what you do in private. It's what you do in that secret place, in that secret moment. And a lot of times what you do in that time when it's just you and God, in the secret moment, it will actually provoke open opposition from the enemy. He'll try to stir up things around you in your life. You know, a lot of times Jesus, he would often withdraw to be alone with God because he knew there were battles coming. And in those times that he was alone with God in private, I believe those times that he was alone with God in the secret place, it drew opposition from the enemy. Because the devil doesn't want you to spend time with God. He doesn't want you to get alone with God because he understands and knows that there's power in those moments. It's those moments that changes you when you get alone with God. And a lot of times you have to make time to be alone with God. You have to withdraw and say, you know, I need some time alone with God to get alone in the secret place with God. So remember that your unwavering consistency with God in secret, in the secret place, it'll often provoke open opposition from the enemy. And he'll use the systems of this world to do that. Here's the last point I want to make and give to you from this story of Daniel in the lion's den. Very important, listen to this. What feels like and looks like isolation is actually divine preservation. God is separating you for a specific moment in time that maybe right now you're not prepared for. I want you to let that sink in and think about it. Because a lot of times in our life, what looks like isolation, you know, God, why am I over here like Moses on the backside of the desert? Nobody knows me. Nobody knows I exist. Nobody calls me. I don't hear from anybody. I feel isolated. And a lot of times, what feels like isolation from human help, human contact, may actually be divine separation, divine preservation, where God is separating you for a specific glory, something big that maybe right now, you're just not prepared for. You know, a lot of times God has to separate us. He has to pull us back and get us alone and get us in a position where we can listen to Him, where we'll hear from Him. Because maybe right now, if God was to promote you, if God was to move you in that direction, move you into that calling, into that position that He's prepared for you, and yet you're not ready for it, God knows you'd fall on your face. You wouldn't be ready. So a lot of times, God in His sovereign wisdom, okay, God in His all-knowing wisdom and glory, a lot of times God will take and He'll put us aside to prepare us. And it's actually not that He's punishing you, but it's that God is preserving you. He's protecting you from falling on your face, from failing. He's getting you prepared for something. And then when that moment comes, when that time happens, you'll look back and realize, you know, wait a minute, man, I am glad that God took me and carried me to this place where I spent time with Him. And while it may have been lonely, while I may have felt isolated, I see now, you know, on this side of that time, I see now what God was doing. He was preparing me. He was getting me ready for this moment because I see now that I wasn't ready then. He was getting me ready for that moment. Now I'm ready. Now I'm ready to move into that. So always remember that what looks like isolation from human contact, from human help, may actually be divine preservation, where God is separating you for a specific moment that you're not ready for right now, but He's getting you ready for that moment. I want to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I want to encourage you to check out our website, rickyheadministries.com. Tell somebody about it. Share this with someone that you believe needs to hear it, and we'll see you next week. God bless you.